The Doors were just that, spiritual doors to the spiritual world. Morrison viewed himself as a shaman whose role it was to mediate between the demonic world and the counterculture of the 60s. Morrison encouraged them to break on through to the other side. He helped Satan initiate countless multitudes into the world of the occult.
Wake up!
I just fell madly in love with him, just totally dumbstruck. He was really an artist, and he was really looking for the truth, and he was really sweet, and he was really a creep, and he was like a full human being at each end.
We want the world and we want it! Now. She says their love life was a wild roller coaster ride.
It was good and it was bad. It was both. It's real exciting because it was really alive and it was really amazing. And sometimes it was like one of those romantic fantasies if he was in a good enough mood. And sometimes it was like a nightmare, though.
She remembers his cold, dark side.
My dog had been run over, and he had been really sweet about it, like over the weekend. And then I saw him, and he said, and he came back, and he was real drunk, and he said something, well, we all have our run-over dogs, just in this really cold, and it just, after he'd acted like really caring, and it just, you know, it was awful.
The reaction I get now, thinking about it, looking back, is that the souls of the ghosts of those dead Indians, maybe one or two of them, were just running around, freaking out, and just leaped into my soul. And they're still there.
Even Doors producer Paul Rothchild admitted, quote, "This spirit entered Jim's body. That was a pivotal event in his entire life. He always viewed himself as a shaman having mystical powers. It was this power that drove him and turned him into a seer." Ray Manzarek, the Doors keyboard player, points out that Jim Morrison was a shaman.
Jim's contribution to music was that Jim was real. Jim was real on stage. Jim was real when he wrote his songs, when he sang his songs in the studio. He was not a performer. He was not an entertainer. He was not a showman. He was a shaman. He was possessed, man. He was possessed, man. Possessed, man.
Manzarek also stated, "On stage, Morrison came alive and was the most exciting and dynamic performer I'd ever seen. He would go through trips on stage. You wouldn't believe the personalities that would come out of him, the intensity that would speak to the audience." Manzarek went on to say 15,000 people would just be hushed, stopped, not even breathing. "Man, when I was on stage with the guy, I don't know what was playing the organ. Sure, it was my fingers, but," implying that the same forces that took control of Jim Morrison took control of his fingers. Manzarek further stated, "When the Siberian shaman gets ready to go into his trance, all the villagers get together and shake rattles and blow whistles and play whatever instruments they have to send him off. It was the same with the Doors when we played in concert." He said it was like Jim was the electric shaman and we were the electric shaman's band, pounding away behind him. It would take him over. I could hit a chord and make him twitch, and he'd go off again. Sometimes he was just incredible, just amazing, and the audience felt it too. Here we see Jim Morrison doing a shamanistic dance as he sought to open himself up to the spirit world and let the demons use his body. Historically, Satan and demons have used shamans to influence primitive tribes throughout the world. This is similar to the shamanistic dances done by shamans, witch doctors, and voodoo priests throughout human history. The only difference is that Jim Morrison was not simply influencing one tribe, but his music has been used to influence generations and the masses. Like voodoo priests who become possessed as they surrender their bodies to the demonic beings, Jim Morrison exhibited very similar behavior throughout his performances. In the seance, the shaman led, Morrison said, a sensuous panic deliberately evoked through drugs, chants, dancing hurls the shaman into trance. Changed voice, convulsive movement, he acts like a madman.
Kitten says the constant boozing mixed with drugs often made Morrison a less than satisfying lover.
A lot of the girls would say that he'd get on top of him and then he'd fall asleep. He would just like you know, kind of like want to touch, and then it kind of passed out.
The face in the mirror won't stop.
The boozing and all-night cruising made a shambles of his life. Controversial author Albert Goldman investigated Morrison's mysterious death and blamed it on a lethal mixture of booze and heroin.
He was often involved in violence and accidents, cracking up his car, stuff like that. He was the most extremely self-destructive person. In fact, my sense of him is that he aimed to live a short but extremely interesting life.
He self-destructed, basically. He didn't put a gun to his head or anything, but it was certainly the alcohol that got him in the end.
Patricia has seen the movie twice and gives it mixed reviews.
It's not the Jim Morrison story, it's the Oliver Stone Jim Morrison story, which is not bad, it's wonderful actually, but it's not the whole thing. You see Jim the shaman, Jim the Lizard King, Jim the out-of-control alcoholic.
That's the Jim Morrison people remember most, and that, his old girlfriends say, is part of the tragedy.
It was a terrible waste, a personal waste for me, for him, an artistic waste for everybody else.
He was supposed to be standing up for all these ideals, and then he turned around and copped out by dying. You know, did the whole exact cliche.
In his art, he had a preoccupation with death. In his personal life, I suppose the alcoholism was soaking up all that, so to speak. We talked about it. He didn't seem to be particularly afraid of it. It was another thing to break on through to.
When the music's over, turn out the light.
When the music ended, suddenly in a bathtub in Paris in 1971, there was no time for goodbyes.
If I'd had a chance to say goodbye to him, I suppose it just would have been that, you know. Goodbye, good luck, and best of luck in your new location.
House upon the hill, moon is lying still, shadows of the trees, witnessing the wild breeze. Come on, baby, run with me.